Welcome to the MoviesxMelanin Show, where I talk about the good, the bad, and the great of movies. If this is your first time here, welcome in. And if you've been here before, the most beautiful thing in the world, of course, is the world itself. If you know the quote, go ahead and let me know down below. But today, I am your host, Shauna McKendrick, and on today's show, we have the multi-talented Aaron Randolph. Day to day, Aaron Randolph is a freelance artist and animator. But when it comes to movies, Aaron sees them as portals to infinite emotional landscapes with boundless creativity. With favorites like Across the Spider-Verse, Ratatouille, and The Truman Show, Aaron's cinematic palette is as diverse as his artistic talents. Aaron, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Pretty good. You might say a little wild. So today we are reviewing The Wild Robot. So this is directed by Chris Sanders, the director and writer of Lilo and Stitch, How to Train Your Dragon, The Croods, and now The Wild Robot in 2024. The epic adventure follows the journey of a robot, Rosm Unit 7134, but her friends can call her Roz. This robot is shipwrecked on an uninhabited island and must learn to adapt to the harsh surroundings, gradually building relationships with animals on the island and becoming the adoptive parent of an orphaned gosling. This is adapted from a 3-book series by Peter Brown, released in September of 2024. And as of the filming of this episode, it has reached and made $159 million in the box office, with a high critic score of 98% on Rotten Tomatoes and an 8.4 out of 10 on IMDb. The main cast of this movie includes Lupita Nyong'o as Roz. We have Kit Connor as Bright Bill, Pedro Pascal as Fink, Mark Hamill as Thorn the Bear, Catherine O'Hara as Pinktail, and Bill Nye as Longneck. So, knowing and seeing these trailers, what did you think going into the movie?
Going into the movie, I had high expectations, super high expectations. I mean, going into it, I had only seen the first trailer as I tried to only catch one. And the first trailer kind of blew me away with the way it handled atmosphere and its beautiful shots, and just the visual aesthetic of the movie was super strong. So I was really excited leading up to it. And then as early viewings and people started flooding into the theater and coming out, I kept hearing nothing but just great things about it. Mm-hmm. So I was really looking forward to what the experience might bring.
Yeah, I'll definitely tell you, when it comes to this movie, only because, it's a robot in nature. It's giving WALL-E. I guess whenever I thought about it, it felt like WALL-E if he would have gotten trapped on a flourishing planet instead of a dying one.
Touche.
What it kind of would have come off as. But overall, I was really excited about it. The moment, and we just rewatched the trailer together.
Right.
The moment it came up and said, from the filmmakers of How to Train Your Dragon, I said, I'm spending all my money. I don't care. Because How to Train Your Dragon is one of my favorite DreamWorks projects as of recent. But overall, again, it's a breath of fresh air for me, because in the world of sequels that we live in, it's nice to see an original film, even though it's made from a book.
Right.
It's nice to see an original project made by a booming, company these days. Because again, we have the same company that has made Prince of Egypt, How to Train Your Dragon, Croods. We've had, there has to be 3 Boss Babies at this point. There has to be 4 Trolls movies at this point.
There was more than one?
Yes.
What?
It's a thing. I've watched it with my goddaughter. There's so many Boss Babies. This is a show, I think.
The show I knew.
There's a show. And I'm there's so much content happening.
Right.
And a lot of them are sequels,
spinoffs,
all this kind of stuff. So it was nice to see an original project. And I was excited because, again, this is coming off the boots of Puss in Boots.
Yeah.
The Last Wish. That movie was spectacular, and eventually you and I need to do an episode on it, because I know you have a special love for the villain of that movie.
Oh, death.
But again, coming off that movie, it's okay, what's next? And to kind of have, I want to say, 2 hits back to back, it's really nice.
Didn't they have the Kraken movie?
What Kraken movie? Oh, so that was in between. I take it back. But we know this is DreamWorks' kind of rap sheet, where it's you have gems among the treasures, and then you just have duds that are they made that movie, but we don't talk about them. We don't talk about Bruno.
Not Bruno.
But okay, so let's get into our favorite characters. What character did you identify with the most?
The beaver. I mean, is it a question? No. I have a huge bias towards beavers. They could have made him anything. I mean, he's my favorite character.
So you're Paddler.
Paddler?
Paddler.
Paddler's name?
Yeah, that's his name.
Excellent name. You know, I'm not just saying that because I'm biased, you know.
I kid you not. One of my favorite sequences with Paddler was definitely the whole tree shtick that was happening the whole time of him like just chopping down this tree slowly but surely.
I love how the moment he started doing that and then everybody made fun of him, I'm like, yep, that's going to come back around and save everybody. I just know
for sure. He's like, there's only one big thing that could save us now. Hey, Paddler, we need to talk to you. Fire burning around them.
You're in trouble, and you need my tree.
Yes, we do.
Now say I'm cool, and don't lie.
It's like, hey, you have a moment of time to talk to us about maybe saving our lives? I don't know.
You're so cool, Paddler.
For me, I think I definitely identified with Rummage. It had like a very short-lived character, mind you. But I think because a lot of people around me are having kids and I am living the dink life, dual income, no kids, I'm a place where people can come and rant to me. And then, because there's a line she says where it's like, well, what could possibly be overwhelming the this, the this, the this, the this? I have kids. And she went, okay. That was so big. Like, I cannot relate. I don't have one. I have plants. And my plants are thriving.
Those are your kids, though.
That's the best I got. That's
Those
all
are
I
your
got.
kids.
That's the closest thing I got right now.
They rely on you.
Hello. No water, they get real dramatic.
Real.
But okay, going into it, do you think that you wasted money, or you think it was worth the watch?
That was definitely worth the watch. Just purely like it's an experience to go and see this movie. Just from a visual sense, I think DreamWorks has gotten to this point, and I think this really happened after the Spider-Verse era, where these studios, a lot of them are really trying to test the boundaries with what kind of visual styles can we experiment that enhance our films and enhance the environment of the films. And I think the environment was so beautiful, and just the style of the movie was gorgeous, and the animation that I would just suggest this to anybody really who's a lover of animation.
No, for sure. I think for me, I would recommend it to those that are definitely new parents or parents in general that are going through transition. And I'll get into that as we go into the review of it all. But I just think that this story kind of had two main storylines happening at the same time.
Right.
And with that, it created a story that you can get multiple lessons out of depending on what you're watching, whose perspective you're watching from.
True.
So I think it's worth a watch. And it's like you as an adult can get lessons from it while also your kids can enjoy it, because it's, and we're going to get into that when it comes to dialogue, but it's dumbed down enough where the kids can enjoy it and be like, oh my gosh, a movie about nature. This is going to be the Earth Day movie. I'm just going to say that right now. This is going to be the movie that they kind of like shove down kids' throats for Earth Day and be like, save the planet. Dang it.
WALL-E Part 2.
Hello? Oh my God. No, the Lorax Part 2.
The Lorax?
Actually.
I haven't seen it. I know, it's a crime. It's a crime. I know. Turning my animation license. I get it.
No, not even, because we planted trees for the Lorax. It was serious.
Who's we?
Like in what was it, middle school?
The
like,
Lorax came out that long ago?
So serious.
Oh.
Like I was either like I had to be middle school, or like my siblings were in middle school and I was like early high school.
Could have sworn I was in high school.
Maybe. But I just remember like having to plant trees because well, I mean, I was in agri-science in high school, so maybe it was high school. But we planted trees and like a bunch of plants to help kind of create oxygen in the air, because I can't think of the word obviously, but they kind of create more oxygen in the air. But we're getting off topic right now. So what did you rate the movie overall?
I rated it an 8 out of 10.
An 8 out of 10. Okay, so that kind of goes down to like 4 out of 5.
4 out of 5. Yeah.
So same thing. I did a 4 out of 5 as well. So we're gonna kind of get into the review now. If you have not seen the movie and you don't want spoilers, I'm gonna go ahead and put the timestamp that you should fast forward to on the screen. But if you're here with us for the long haul and you're ready to hear our thoughts on the movie, let's go ahead and strap on in. So, what were your thoughts on the movie? Spoiler filled.
Spoiler filled?
Spoiler filled. Give it to me.
Oh, it sucked. It absolutely blew. Oh no, I'm playing. It was a good movie, you know. Overall, I'd have to say like it's stellar on most accounts. I think the only things I probably had problems with were the editing and dialogue at times. But I think it was a very coherent story. I think it had a very straightforward but a plot that was full of heart. As you mentioned, there were 2 concurrent storylines going on, less of a subplot, main plot sort of thing, but more of dual stories with the amount of time and heart that each were given. But they all, coalesced together into a singular theme, which I do believe to be overriding our programming, becoming more than what we were told to be or what we were destined to be, and doing that with the motivation of love. And I think that's a beautiful message, and it was conveyed in a very beautiful and unique way.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to this movie, it's interesting because I had mentioned earlier that depending on what perspective you watch it from, well, you'll get the most out of it for that perspective.
Right.
Going into it, of course, you kind of expect something different. I was talking about WALL-E earlier and stuff, but
right.
The beauty of this movie is unmatched.
Right.
And I'm a fan of movies where if I could freeze the movie in a spot, screenshot it, and put it on my computer as a wallpaper, then the movie's successful for me.
Right.
Because that was me as a kid. Like How to Train Your Dragon specifically, they would have these nice, beautiful frames. I would freeze it, click. It's now my wallpaper for like 3 months.
Oh, straight up. Yeah.
So when you're telling me like every 5 minutes, I could do that in this movie.
In this movie.
Even in the first act alone, that butterfly shot
right.
is stunning.
Roz climbing up the wall. I would have screenshot that.
Hello.
Why'd they make the wall look so beautiful? That doesn't make any sense.
And it's funny, like listening to the behind the scenes and hearing them talk about like Puss in Boots being successful so that they could do this movie when
right.
it came to art style, and then going off the art style that they did for the books and that kind of stuff, and trying to bring that into the animation world. And just hearing the challenges and the ins and outs of that. But to see how close they got to the book and paper iterations of how these characters look, just looked really cool to me.
Right.
So we can go into, let's go into soundtrack.
Soundtrack?
Because I think you and I had the same very similar feelings on that because it was beautiful.
I want to bring up one scene in particular,
yes.
And we both agree on this scene. The scene where the flock takes off.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And our little Bright Bill decides to, fly away with this flock, and then Roz has sort of a second thought, and it's like, hey, I didn't tell my son I love him. Mm-hmm. And she chases after him, and the music is swelling and building. It just becomes more dynamic. You really hear each instrument picking up and building and adding to one another. The franticness of it just kind of swells to a point, and then it bursts the moment she bursts out. Yeah. And it's a beautiful just look at how music and animation can coincide, film in general can coincide, and really just create a moment that is sort of greater than the sum of all its parts.
Yeah, I think the beauty of that scene for me was when, of course, he was like, I could use a boost. And I was like, oh my gosh, look at them healing, but not really healing, but look at this. But she had him on her shoulder, and as they were running all together,
right,
there was a moment where you're in this sea of birds, realistic sea of geese.
Right.
And you could see Roz, again, she's silver, looks different from the birds in the background. But when it came to Bright Bill, he fit in, literally. Like, if you weren't staring at Bright Bill on her shoulder,
right,
he blended in with her like his entire background at this point. To like all this prejudice beforehand to finally fit into somewhere, to finally find where he fits. And then even to afterwards where he fits in the environment, he leads the flock and whatnot, and comes home and is like, this is home. This is my family. Like, yeah, I belong here technically, but I choose here.
Right.
I choose this as home. And that was just really the beauty of the scene, that like as the flock got bigger and the more that it filled the scene, the higher the emotions got and like the larger that they got for you. And it's like, I don't know, it's just really interesting that how the combination of visual and audio together in that sense, it really does create this well of emotion no matter the storyline, honestly. Right. Because, and we could talk about plot soon, but it's like, it built up the relationship with Roz and Bright Bill. Great. Mother-son relationship, beautiful.
Of course.
But nothing to the point where I would be sobbing at this point where she let go. But it was just that beautiful combination of a stunning score and stunning visuals. It's just like, oh my gosh, she let him go.
And it's throughout the movie too.
Correct.
The movie's fully atmosphere.
Yes, absolutely.
And the score definitely reflects that.
100%. Now, I do want to talk about attraction, because that's where I think a lot of the audience score comes from. Because we know, like, audience will be like, the critics will say, oh, it's a 75. Audience, 98. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
I think a lot of people kind of rate their movies on attraction alone, because it's like, is it entertaining? Did I enjoy myself? Great. 9 out of 10. and they don't think about anything else realistically.
True.
So when it comes to attraction, it kept my attention 100%.
Mm-hmm.
It was entertaining nonetheless.
Yeah.
The characters were great, and that kind of goes into dialogue and acting, but every voice actor involved fit their role beautifully.
They blended so well.
They really did, because at one point I was in the theater, and people, when they started doing the credits,
Yeah.
and it's like Lupita Nyong'o, Pedro Pascal, Mark Hamill. People were like, "What? Mark Hamill?" And it was just really interesting, because I did the same thing. So I was like, how did you slide under the radar? Because I'm a Mark Hamill stan, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Loved him in Age of Resistance for Dark Crystal. Of course, Star Wars.
Of course.
The Joker. Like all these different things. I know his voice at some point. But to now, he's getting to a point where he's done so much and his voice has done a lot.
Right.
He has to change it up now, so he sounds unrecognizable, and he fully slid under the radar for me.
He's such a veteran. I mean, he
He
didn't
is.
have a lot to say, but the bear did stand out in its presence alone. And
Yeah, he
then
did.
even I wasn't sure how he'd sound like, but even when he talked, that presence carried. There was still that menace and personality, but even in the moment where, yeah, he allowed these animals to sleep on him and around him, and allowed that, he said, "I'm going to honor this truce." I don't know about the rest of y'all. I believed it. And it just really shows the experience of him as a voice actor to be able to convey those two dynamics with that character that got so little, screen time with him. He's excellent, and I didn't recognize him until the credits either.
Yeah, not at all.
Shoot, I knew Lupita was going to be in it, and I
Right.
barely recognized her voice.
And I will say, I give Pedro Pascal props, because of course we know him from The Mandalorian,
Of course.
Game of Thrones and such. But
He's
those
fantastic.
those hours in the booth for Mandalorian, I think, really kind of helped stretch that muscle for sound work.
Yep.
And it was seamless. And like, of course, we can go into, I think, let's go into dialogue a little bit, because I kind of want to do what we didn't like about the movie.
Sure.
So I'm gonna give it to you, because I know you have some strong feelings about dialogue.
Yeah, dialogue was...
Oh my god, I wish y'all could see his phone, because like he had to scroll through like a bunch of notes, and all of a sudden you just see like a paragraph on paragraph of notes for dialogue.
Oh, these are bullet points. Come on
A
now.
lot of bullet points. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, let me summarize then. With dialogue, I felt it wasn't bad. It was just, it was very non-specific and stock for me throughout a lot of the movies. And what I mean by that is, there were certain dialogues that if I were to take them just isolated, no context, and plot them into any other film that the context of the situation fit, that it wouldn't seem out of place.
Okay.
It didn't feel very character specific or unique to any given scenario that this movie alone would set in its world would, hold it to. And so it got a lot of dialogue as well that felt on the nose because of that too.
Okay.
Where I felt that characters were saying things that it just kind of took me out, like the Fox character being so aware of his own inadequacies, or Longneck just being there just to spit just average generic wisdom of an old character, but not really knowing enough about his character to really make it personal to him.
Yeah.
And then with Roz at the very end, I know it's probably a big moment. It probably resonated with some people. It didn't resonate with me. She called herself a wild robot, title call, title drop, whatever you want to call it. Those kind of things, while, subjectively may work, to me, it kind of robbed the movie of the immersion for me, because I felt the hand of the writer at work.
Okay.
And that's kind of my issue with the dialogue. It really did feel as artistic and full of heart as everything else is, and as personal as everything else is. This dialogue in this movie very felt oriented towards sort of a more youthful or a more simplistically oriented sort of perspective.
Yeah, and I know you touched on Longneck, but we can go into detail about his character, period.
Sure.
Because and the phrase was used, he was created to die. And I agree with you 100%, because like we have movies like How to Train Your Dragon 2 specifically, where if you've not seen it, please fast forward like 10 seconds. But Stoic dies.
Right.
But again, they built it up to where Hiccup was having a problem stepping up
Of course.
and needed to be forced to step up
Mhm.
at that point. But the story they presented for Bright Bill was that he couldn't fit in.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole him stepping up to be a leader all of a sudden wasn't necessary, if that makes sense.
I don't know. I feel like it was necessary for his story because
Well, I mean,
his
in Bright Bill, in Longneck's death, I mean.
own Longnecks, yeah, it was more of just a means to an end for Bright Bill, but it really did nothing for Longneck, the character. I was very interested why, of all these birds, why is he the one that just decides, yeah, this one's special?
Yeah.
I mean, they do sort of explain it. Yes, he's a smaller bird. He beat the odds. But why does that speak to him when it spoke to nobody else? And he's an older bird, but what is it about his story, what he's experienced in his life, who he knew? I wanted to know more about so many of these creatures, him included, that it kind of disappointed me that he had such just poignant, like just strong lines, but nothing to back it up, nothing to inform it. And then to have those lines, have those moments, and sort of just be there to usher this young character forward, and then to have sort of a death you could see coming from a mile away. Not that it missed any impact, but it definitely didn't completely capitalize on the impact the way it could have.
Yeah, and on that front, like some simple changes could have been made. Like in the dialogue, he states that he's one of the leaders of the migration.
Right.
A simple thing would have been when Bright Bill comes up, have 4 or 5 of them all together, and he be the one to go out and reach out to him.
True.
Because then it can be like, he's just one of those, like he has great outreach. That's just his thing. Great. That would have solved a lot of problems.
Right.
But he's only alone. He was the main voice of the migration. When all this chaos starts happening at the Rosam facility, it's like he's the one voice to kind of get everybody together. So I'm like, where are these other elders or other leaders of the migration? Because it only seemed like there was one.
Yeah.
And then for Bright Bill to lead them to the nesting grounds, I thought there were more leaders. You just got here, man. I don't understand.
And a little bit separated from dialogue, but it did strike me strange that of all the birds to lead, that Bright Bill was chosen, but he's dealt with a peaceful robot his whole life. This experience is completely new to him as it is to everybody else, even though he's familiar with having a robot around. It was not under violence. He had a specific training to, capitalize on his endurance and get him stronger. But to be able to lead this whole, flock of birds out of this situation, and they didn't respect him whatsoever, it kind of felt like it was a reward that wasn't like given the right scenes to build up to.
Yes. And in that mode, we can go into editing because that kind of goes into pacing and the pacing issues with this movie. On the second watch, it just seemed really fast. Even in my notes, because the second time I try to kind of create a timeline for myself. So when I go back through the movie in my notes, it's like this happened, then this happened, then this happened.
Right.
But as I was going, I'm like, oh, then she gets the egg. Then you meet Vic. Okay. It was very much that. It was very quick.
Happened, and then this happened,
and then this happened. And it wasn't and this happened because this and this and this and this. It was a very and then.
That's the weird thing, though. I usually when you get into those and then this happened, this happened, this happened, it seems a sequence of events. But I felt the story underneath. Yeah. Nothing felt like it just happened just because it happened. Everything was character informed and was believable. I just personally think like a lot of the editing didn't allow breath for those moments to really sit in them and observe them properly. It really felt like the pacing of this movie undercut a lot of the moments I wanted to see from it. I felt like the first act specifically was undercut. And in a movie that is not even 2 hours, I think they could have dedicated another 10 to 20 minutes allowing for more scenes of, let's say, Roz getting adjusted and adapting to the lifestyle in this world rather than just reacting like she did at first, or getting more fleshed out of their relationship before we get hit with that betrayal of, oh, you didn't tell me you did this to my parents, or even getting introduced to Longneck earlier and getting more of his backstory. I feel like as much of the world exploration vibes I got from the trailer, the movie somewhat gave us that, but in progressing the story, I felt like it took away from a lot of the world exploration and just the character deep dives I wanted to see from it.
Yeah, and just for note, when we're talking about Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, our Act 1 starts at the very beginning with the Thunderstrucks or whatever, and kind of ends once you get into that transition of the little picture and the little duckling to the more mature duck, and we're about to start swimming. That's Act 1. Act 2 starts in the swimming scene where he's getting bullied and whatnot by the other geese, and kind of ends right around winter, when winter ends and the summer starts to break through and the ice and the snow starts to defrost. And then Act 3 is from that point all the way through the end. And we say that to say, like, Act 2 was very montage heavy.
It was
very montage heavy. We're talking about the montage of him learning how to swim, learning how to fly, all these different things. And it was like, a break. Let's introduce Long Neck. Yeah. I'm important. I don't know if you know, but I'm really important. As a geese, I'm really important.
And the Thunderbird.
Yeah, and the Thunderbird. Yeah.
Just out of the blue, and then never see him again.
Correct. Well, funny enough, in research, they created that character specifically for the movie. He wasn't in the book at all.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty cool inclusion.
Very much so. I think it was needed. I don't know how he would have learned how to fly without that, but I think that could have been a really good place for Long Neck.
Yeah.
If Long Neck would have set up, if Long Neck would have stepped up in that moment, it would have been like, okay, I now see why you're taking him under your wing. I can now see why you're thinking, oh yeah, he has leadership potential.
Right.
I can see all that, but we created a character instead, which was a cool concept, because I think the creation of the Falcon was to kind of incorporate the story of just, it takes a village.
True.
Because that ended up being like one of the underlying kind of stories, that it takes a village to raise a child. Because even when he finally started flying, he picked up the rock, I'm almost done, and landed, all the animals were on the side, and that one little raccoon.
That was funny.
It was just so
I forgot
excited
about that.
But like, again, it takes a village. When Roz gets attacked, they all step up. It takes a village overall. So, I mean, I get it, but that would have been the perfect place for him. Now that we're talking about it.
That's a great point. Hadn't thought about that.
I didn't either until I said it. I didn't. But yeah, honestly, I was gonna say something. Oh, we were talking about pacing. My biggest problem with the industry in general, because these last couple of reviews I've done, we've talked about pacing a lot. About like, the pacing was, pacing was a roller coaster. The pacing was this. It wasn't. The pacing hasn't been nailed in a long time, I think, for me, specifically this year. With that being said, we're talking about the TikTok generation, and we're talking about long form having to conform to short form. And the biggest conversation is like, if we want to make short form content, great, make it a TV show. We don't have to keep conforming this long-term content into short form just to appease a generation, which is going to change sooner than later.
Yeah.
Keep it long form. Give them more TV shows. If this is the TV show generation, great. Fantastic. And when we're ready to go back into movies, we'll go back into it. But I feel like it's like disrespecting the art.
Yeah.
To continue to shorten these movies, dumb down these movies, just to make an impact or just to make a buck. Because I think you've made a point about like giving it like another 20 minutes or so.
Yeah.
It could have done incredible works for this movie.
There is a thing of conforming to your demographic, because you do want people to watch your movie. And I do understand that this movie was not only for families, but definitely for an audience that may skew younger, that, you know, may need stimulation to keep attention to a degree. But I think there is an element of art, of storytelling, that needs to be honored, where you can only compromise so much without the actual art being sort of conformed to something that doesn't serve it.
Yeah.
And even recognizing the change of the general population's consumption of media. I don't know if that was the reason that they edited the movie or paced the movie in the way that they did.
Yeah.
But if that is a motivation, I would definitely encourage just trusting in the audience more. They bought tickets to the movie. They're sitting in this theater. They're committing to the characters and this journey. Take them on this journey. If you want them to feel a weight, if you want them to feel an atmosphere or a mood or an emotion, and even if you are trying to tell so much story in a given space, allow your movie the time. I know this might be a hot take, but you know, 3-hour movies, if they're motivated by something necessary, it's not bad. I know we're accustomed to 2 hours and less, and that typically is the norm, but take however long you need to tell the story properly and to allow your characters and your world to breathe. That's the one thing that really was bothering me the whole movie. I stayed immersed, but every now and then I get wrapped up in a situation, an emotion, and a character's sort of drama, and then it immediately just goes straight into the next drama, into the next action, to the next conversation. It's like, wait, what happened to this?
Yeah.
It didn't give my emotions enough time to catch up or for them to collect. I just kept dropping things. It's like when you're trying to juggle something, you're trying to catch so many things at once, you miss something.
And when it comes to like these 3-hour movies, let us choose. It's not that hard because we're going to spend our money what you think we're going to spend our money on.
Right.
It is what it is. But on top of that, a 3-hour movie doesn't feel like a 3-hour movie if you're on a good ride.
That's true. And not that this needed to be 3 hours. I only said like max 20 minutes, but that was just an example for sure of just trusting your audience to take the journey with you. And even though you're catering to them, honor the art, honor the story you're telling. I know finding the right pacing might be hard for, certain scenes and the craft of, creating a story, but doing your best to make sure that everything just feels right when it comes out.
Yeah. And I want to kind of, I guess, scoot over to something else when it comes to editing and pacing.
Sure.
The villain of the movie. As short-lived as our little Act 3 villain was, what were your thoughts on her?
I was not impressed. To your Wally note, I very much got that sense of that villain from that movie.
Yeah.
But I felt Wally did it better.
For sure, because he was there from the beginning.
He was, that, and he was all about his programming. I felt the thing that kind of bit this villain in the foot for me was just sort of its own acknowledgement, going back to dialogue, its own acknowledgement of its own moral compass being skewed.
Yeah.
Its own self-awareness, its own acknowledgement of its more sadistic qualities kind of made it seem at odds with this society that was supposed to be about peace, supposed to be about order and following your own programming. And she had too much personality for me personally.
Yeah. Come aboard, 7134. We will fix you right up.
I think I've forgotten something.
Roz, it is imperative you return to this ship. Gotcha.
If she's supposed to be the foil for our main character, Roz, then I would have felt that the more appropriate direction would to be something a little bit more neutral, something just chaotic neutral, just about following the job rather than just, your general evil. And it kind of just, it didn't make the villain all that effective to me, especially with the short screen time it had in the long term.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you have like the little soldiers that she had with her, right?
True.
And again, they were on their program and they were like, "Where do you want us? Great, we go."
Yep.
There was nothing else extra about it, even though when she had asked, "Do you have her yet?" and she's like, "No, she won't come. She's fighting." and those little things, it was like, okay, it's people are going against their programming, like the animals are causing them to go against their programming. That's fine.
Yeah.
But because the people she brought with us were also in tune with programming, in tune with like the very Siri, very tunnel vision mindset, I agree with you. She kind of felt off-putting. And like, for me, if you're going to have a villain, make the threat everlasting or have it lingering. You know what I mean? And we brought up the Wally villain. I forget the actual character's name. I'll just throw it on the screen right here.
Of course.
Bing.
Yeah. That name.
Yeah, him, that guy. But with him, he was ever lingering. And even within the moment where they're doing the pan of all the photos and he's in every photo, but you don't know how ominous that is until we get closer to the end. It's like,
brilliant point.
He's in every photo. Oh, you know what I mean? Like,
and I won't spoil what media I'm talking about, but there was something similar done in a previous movie where there was this big mastermind and they were playing puppets with, underlings, individuals. And this main character of this movie was dealing with one of these underlings, and that was the main villain of the movie. And then, surprise, third act, final villain. But this character interacts with our main character through the body of the puppet. Yeah. And I would have found that more interesting if we had more interactions, like in that scene with the waterfall where she finds the extra bodies. Like if that one robot had, I don't know, like carried some of the personality of whatever that hive mind was and just started introducing that.
Yeah, and it's interesting. When we're talking about, I guess, the similarities between this movie and Wall-E, I think my biggest thing, because we saw the impact of By and Large. and how it basically sucked everything out the planet, and we decided to just go adios.
Right.
With this movie, we see the impact of I think just humanity on the planet, which I think is the biggest thing. But when it comes to the major company, I think I wish it would have been like the overshadowing problem.
Right.
And then it would have been like, let's just send our underling of us
Mm-hmm.
as extension of us, and then it go like that. But because it was always just like, we're peaceful. What was it? We're a pre-planned society. How can we make your life even better? Let's introduce the Rosums. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
it seemed bad. We could see the little bits of impact and how basically nature always wins and nature always takes back over.
Of course.
But the company didn't seem bad enough, or didn't seem to have a large enough impact to where it was like, oh, the company's bad. Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. That's why she's acting like this. Got it. But it never came off that way to me.
It's this sort of duality, this battle between control and adaptability.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I feel like needed to be dealt with when it came to the villain,
Yeah.
where rather than sort of paint them in sort of this psychotic way, have them be well-meaning but over-controlling, have our mentality identify with their mission, but have our emotions connect with Roz more, where it's a more of a compelling back and forth, even if for that brief time.
Yeah. And I will give credit where credit is due, or at least a bit of grace. Because we're in an environment where movies get canceled like that, you know, you have to kind of create movies with an ending already.
True.
And if you get a sequel, great. If
Right.
you don't, okay, well, the story ended anyway, so it's standalone.
Mm-hmm.
But with that entail, I think, and I believe that was the intention at this point, to make this as a standalone movie, just in case it doesn't get a green lit for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I kind of want to say, like, that's why maybe the villain was that short? Was that short lived? I mean, but I agree. I'm like, if it's going to be short lived, make it worth it.
Right.
Because again, Wall-E didn't get a sequel. Done and done. But I could see a sequel for Wall-E of how they rebuild Earth, because it seems like a very impossible task.
Yeah, I may not remember his name, but I remember that robot.
Hello.
That giant wheel. Mm-mm.
Hello. Who was steering the ship into Danger Town. Yes. Oh, sorry. There's a note from the peanut gallery. Yes. Otto. The name is Otto.
Otto.
See, this is why we have him in the studio at all times. Chad is my symbiotic producer over here. Thank you, Chad. A hand clap for Chad. Oh my gosh, he's so hot. Anyway, but yeah, so that's about it. I think we've hit everything. On a happier note, I believe we both gave a check mark for directing and it factor.
Mm-hmm.
Quickly, directing is great. I mean, look at the projects he's been on before.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised that this is a good movie.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we had some problems with it, it's nowhere near terrible. And there are worse movies that may be coming out right after this movie by DreamWorks, but who will know until it comes out?
Oh.
Maybe, who knows?
Really?
What do you think about directing and it factor overall?
Directing and it factor, I think, as you yourself said, I think the vision for this film was fantastic. And while I did feel the editing / the pacing really truncated a lot of the movie, it didn't kill the movie.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I'd say it's a problem because I wanted more from it. I wanted more from this world. I wanted more from this character. I think the premise itself alone is just interesting. You have this sci-fi robot having to adapt to a world that it is not accustomed to, the raw wild, and interacting with these different communities of creatures, and it's adaptable and it's able to take from so many. Like, what kind of creature does that create? It's sort of like in the MCU where you have Adam Warlock, and you give sort of this infant in this world like an infinite amount of potential and abilities, and you put them in as a science experiment, what comes out. And so that was the movie that I was interested in seeing, and in a lot of ways it did deliver. I'd say with its it factor, I loved the world and just the premise and a lot of the execution, but I also loved the design of Roz herself. I think one of the coolest things to me was using light as a mechanic for her speaking and emoting, but also simultaneously using her mechanics as a tool for visual symbolism or for establishing a tone. I'm just remembering when she's getting chased through the woods by the bear, you have this pale blue just sky and atmosphere as it's raining, and it's very dreary, but it's just the red on her that's lighting as she's panicking creates this sense of urgency, dread, sort of like bloodshed intent. And I just think that's such a clever use of your character design within color contrast with your world to create an atmosphere, to create a mood. Or even when she learns the language of the animals, it sort of has this feeling that she is almost like a plant that has blossomed. When she has this tree on her after spending so long and things have grown around her, she's blossomed into her new life. Or she's rescuing the animals and you see her lights sort of acting as a lighthouse. Just, it feels very much like an artist having a field day with telling their story. And that I will never take away from this movie. Even though I had some issues with this movie, I still think it's a great movie, and I still think for anyone interested in film, interested in animation, wanting a heartfelt story that's about family connection and overcoming the impossible to become who you're truly meant to be, I think just all those things together make this a movie that's worthwhile watching, especially this year.
I will say, before we end, we got to talk about Ross's design, period, because I didn't realize until the second time she didn't have a mouth. Because I guess it was like maybe a placebo effect or just my brain. It was just like, I hear her voice. And when I think back to it, I think she had a mouth. But like watching it a second time, I was like, oh, she was emoting purely through light, which you mentioned, but it was like through her eyelids, I think specifically, because she didn't even have human eyes like that. Like it was just like these blue chasms that might have had coating depending on what state she was in.
Right.
But her eyelids were so expressive.
Very.
And I know we talked about her body because, of course, most robots are like very stiff, very on task, very tunnel vision, very focused. But her, like, from the moment she got there, when she had to start crawling up like a crab, her body became adaptive. It was very fluid. It was very flexible. I'll use the word flexible, like Elastigirl. Very moldable to her environment, I think. And the moment, like with all of them, the first 10 minutes or so, the first act we're talking about, it's like she started mimicking any animal so that she can continue with her mission, which was to find where she's supposed to be, but also starting to, even those little moments, start adapting to her environment. And when Brightbill got older, she went through her like array of animals that she'd memorized. It's like you see how far she had come as a character within months. Because it doesn't take ducks that long to age, and they mentioned it, like from spring to summer I thought I'd have friends. You know, it's what Brightbill said. So it's like this adaptation for months and a quick adaptation, and even that time lapse in general was really beautiful animation wise. And I think that's a thing for me when characters in movies are like, oh, let me learn this skill, beep boop boop, all done. But it was like you see the time lapse and the time it took for her to adapt to her environment in that sense.
Right. And I think that was cool to use her, to your point, the design of the robot was very important because you have to adapt to the fact that there are limited the eyes are the windows to the soul. There's so many things in the nuance of the face that can easily communicate emotion. But you have this circle with circles on it. How do you communicate? You have to create a body, you have to create a mechanic about this creature, this character that not only is adaptable to their environment, but also can move in a way where their emotions are never a mystery. And I think the animators and the designers and the concept artists who worked on it, I think they succeeded excellently in that task.
And I will give it to the director because if you don't know much about his history, he was an animator and an artist overall. So you kind of see his hand and like the different iterations of Roz when they put those out of where she started versus now. Like even the moment where the beaver kind of gave her the new leg, the different iterations of that photo alone went through I think went to 2 to 3 I think different iterations. So you kind of see the hand of Chris as a director, I think, overall, and just kind of seeing some interviews with him, and you see this like childlike energy with him, and you see it again. He did Lilo and Stitch. What's more childlike than that? And then fun fact, he actually voiced Stitch for the TV show and all the other spinoffs.
No kidding.
Yeah, and I was like, go boy.
He's a legend too.
You go boy.
Okay.
But again, that's great directing. You know, that's great vision. That's the great captain of a ship. You know, and you can see it through how well this project was received by people.
Right.
But overall, My final score is a 4 out of 5, and Aaron, I believe you ended up the same with a 4 out of 5.
Definitely 4 out of 5.
Yeah, the way we knocked it down was because of editing and dialogue overall. And again, small changes make a big difference. And that's a wrap on today's episode of the Movies and Melanin Show. I want to give a huge shout out and a heartfelt thank you to my friend and guest host, Mr. Aaron Randolph. Applause, applause, applause. And if you want to keep up with all things Movies and Melanin, you can find me at MoviesxMelanin. The X is for the and. And if you want to look for me on Spotify or YouTube, go ahead and search up the Movies and Melanin Show and it should pop right up. Let's go ahead and stay connected and keep this conversation going. After all, it's more merrier at the movies. And remember, new episodes drop every other Wednesday, so mark your calendars. You won't want to miss the next episode. And I want to hear from you, my beloved audience. Did our critique match what you thought? What should we review next? Hit me up with your suggestions, and who knows, maybe I'll pick yours for the next blockbuster episode. But thanks for tuning in, and until next time, keep your popcorn buttery and your movie choices stellar. See y'all later.